fascist government of the Nazis signs a non-aggression pact with the communists of the Soviet Union. Do you remember when we talked about the political spectrum? Do you remember that at all? Like, and liberals are on the left, and conservatives are on the right, Democrats on the left, Republicans on the right. Well, fascists are as far right as you can go. Like, they're like extreme, like super extreme alt-right conservative Republicans. And communists are super left. So they naturally do not like each other. And Stalin and Hitler particularly didn't like each other. But they come up with this plan, and Hitler says, look, I'll conquer Poland and I'll give you half, and I'll take the other half, and we will agree not to fight. And Stalin says, cool. And what the Germans are trying to do is avoid a two-front war, right? In World War I, Germany had to fight France and England on this side and Russia on the other side. So that's too hard. So they say, best friendships with communist Russia so that they can go west. So in 1939, they invade Poland. 6 weeks later, they are getting ready to invade France. France has declared war on Germany at this point, so has England. So England sends a force of like 500,000 men to France. And France is mobilizing its huge military, but they're still operating under the idea of defensive war, right? They have the Maginot Line, and then they bring up their forces, and they have soldiers standing still with tanks behind them, kind of like mobile artillery. That is a defensive posture, and they're ready for Germany to invade. But Germany doesn't invade where they think they're going to invade, which is they think they're going to go through Belgium and the Netherlands like in World War I. We're not going to get into the whole thing. But instead, they charge through a forest. And nobody thinks that they're going to be able to get through the forest. Why do you think the France and England thought there's no way those tanks are going to get through the forest? Malcolm?
Because they're going to knock over all the trees, and then eventually they're going to get stuck.
Have any of your parents, like, you ever like drive out camping or whatever? And like, you have to stay on the roads. If you don't stay on the roads, how are you going to get like, imagine driving a tank with a bunch of trees. Like, there's no way you're going to be able to get through. So they think it's not possible. So they put like kind of a token defense force in the Ardennes forest. They don't understand that the new Panzer tanks have been fitted with like, they look like kind of like big metal teeth on the front. And so they're just like running over the trees. And so they go through the Ardennes forest, they smash through this token defensive line, and all of a sudden they're behind the Maginot Line. So everybody's waiting for Germany, and all of a sudden they hear they're back there. And so they're all trying to turn their vehicles and get their supply lines and everything turned around when the Germans come up and hit them from behind. And the French soldiers fight bravely. France has kind of got a bad rap in World War II. Like, they were more interested in drinking wine and smoking cigarettes than they were in like, fighting. But they fought bravely. But the French army was not prepared. It was not mobilized fast enough. In fact, many of the French soldiers had guns, but not bullets. So imagine running into a war. You're already a dude with a gun fighting a tank. And now you don't have any bullets. Or you have 5 bullets. What are you going to do with that? So the French army is still trying to get its head about it, and Germany hits them from behind. Yeah, Malcolm?
I know, like, still would be a bad situation, but didn't their guns have, like, stabby parts on top so they could still kill people?
Yeah, they did have bayonets. But remember, and one of the French soldiers did shoot and kill German soldiers and fought. They weren't just like, oh my gosh. But remember that the French army is a reactive army. It's reacting to things. The German army is mechanized. So, most of the things are metal, right? Like there's metal tanks, and the infantry are in metal cars. And so, this idea of like hit and run is so hard for the French military to get used to, because the Germans hit them at some place and punch through. And the French are trying to react to where the Germans will be next, right? What if they invaded Germany? What would have happened? That would have caused Germany to have to do something. But they were always reacting to Germany. Germany comes through here, we go over there. They go over there, we go over there. And so the Germans are constantly one step ahead of them. They blow apart the French military in short order. And not only that, they trap the English at the port city of Dunkirk. You guys ever hear that? They made a movie called Dunkirk. Mm-hmm. And they've surrounded the English army. There's hundreds of thousands of English soldiers that are stuck. And they have the Stukas that are strafing, and they're like, but the German army makes one mistake. They could have defeated England right there. But for whatever reason, they hold. Now, it's here that we have to talk about how racist the Nazis were again. They were super racist. But they also had an idea of like a tier system. The Germans being at the top, right? They're the master race. Have you ever heard this term before?
Yeah.
You ever play like Wolfenstein, right? There's like the Nazi, like blonde-haired, blue-eyed master race. They're at the top, obviously, according to their terrible philosophy. Then below them, you have the English. The English are almost equal to the Germans. We'll get back to that. Then below them, you have the French, right? The French are like European Caucasian people, but they're not Germans. They're, Gaelic. Then below them, you have like the Spanish and like the Greeks, kind of the swarthy, and they are not as white because remember, they had been conquered by the Muslims, right? So they are, not Aryan. Sorry, I know that this sounds all terrible, but this is what they believed. Then below them, you have like the Slavic people, like the Russians. Ugh. And then below them, you have like, Asians and people from Africa. And then below them, you have some, and then all the way at the end, at the bottom, who's at the bottom?
Like straight up.
According to Nazis.
The African Americans.
No, actually, even below them is the Jews, right?
Oh.
That's why they go after them so hard. They see them as like the bottom. Ugh, gross. But the reason I'm saying all this is because it's important to understand, if you're studying World War II, how they were thinking. But the Germans felt that the English were, and the Scandinavians, like Norway and Sweden, were similar to them. They were a common people. Do you remember why? Do you remember? Oh. Yeah, go ahead.
Because all the Germanic tribes, like Anglo-Saxons and Germanic tribes, they're all Germanic tribes.
England is Germany. The language we speak, English, is a German language, right? So Germany under Hitler had this idea of creating a Reich, which means like an empire, right? And they believed that Germany had two other Reichs before it. They believed back in the distant past, when like Odin and Thor were like kicking it, that was the first Reich. Then when the Germans overthrew the Romans and created the Anglo-Saxon England and all that, that was the second Reich, second empire. And now under Hitler, they were going to create the Third Reich. Have you heard any of these words before?
I don't know what a Reich is.
Right, but like if you've ever, whenever you study World War II in high school and they say the Third Reich, that is another name for Nazism, this empire that they were going to build, right? Now, the reason I'm saying all this is they could have crushed the English army. They're surrounded and they are basically out of ammunition. There's no like battlements. But Hitler holds his forces, and he like calls Winston Churchill, hey, so do you want to join the Third Reich and have like a German Anglo-Saxon empire and kill all the people who don't look like us? And Winston Churchill's not stupid. He's like, tell me more about this. And he kind of is like stringing him along. Why do you think? Malcolm?
Give them more time to prepare.
Buying time. And meanwhile, while Hitler and the Germans pause, Dunkirk is just over the Strait of the English Channel, which is like basically 20 miles. And so they gather every ship in South England. Like, you can literally look up videos. There's like old like fishing trolleys. Like, you just see like the small boat that's just got the outboard motor.
Yeah.
And all of these ships, merchant vessels, yachts, like rowboats, everything. And they start just picking up all of these English soldiers and taking them back to England. And before the Germans can react, they get the English armies back to England. And that saves the English army. Had they lost 500,000 men at the beginning of the war, who knows what would have happened? But it saves the English army so England can still fight. After Dunkirk, the Germans turn around, they invade and take Paris. And when they take Paris, it's like a body blow to the French fighters. Paris is in the north of France. The south of France, like Marseille and Lyon and all these cities, still existed and still had French troops. But Paris for France is like, imagine if Washington, D.C. was also New York City. Paris is like the place. And so when France is taken, there are many French who want to keep on fighting. But the prime minister is a guy named Vichy, and he surrenders to the Germans. And so France is defeated. The biggest military in Europe at the time is defeated in just a month. And it's a huge blow to Western democracy, right? You see Nazi stormtroopers, you know, have you ever seen like the way they march?
Yeah.
It's called goose stepping, right? They step with their legs up straight. They're marching down the Rue de Calais. They put the Nazi flag, the swastika, on the top of the Eiffel Tower. You see Adolf Hitler at the Louvre looking at the Mona Lisa, and people are like, this is a nightmare. This is a nightmare. How did this happen? So Poland's knocked out. France is knocked out. The Netherlands and Belgium are knocked out. Denmark signs a peace treaty with Germany. Spain signs a peace treaty with Germany. Italy is allied with Germany. So basically, the only like countries left are England and the Scandinavian countries. So the Germans get on a boat, sail over to Norway, blitzkrieg their way through Scandinavia, and Scandinavian countries of Sweden, Finland, and Norway fall. So at this point, the only country that has still declared war and is fighting Nazi Germany is England. And they are the next to be conquered. But what's the problem for the German blitzkrieg in conquering England? Malcolm?
England is like an island almost.
It's an island, right?
Yeah.
So they know that if they get all their dudes on a boat and start sailing across the English Channel, what could happen? Jaden?
They could basically lose all their men like instantly.
Yeah, it's like, imagine you got a boat filled with 500 dudes and a grenade lands in it, right? Not only does it kill the guys, but now it blows a hole in the boat and all the men sink. So they know they have to control the skies. So Adolf Hitler looks to the head of the German Air Force, which is called the Luftwaffe, and says, we need you to defeat the Royal Air Force. How long do you think it'll take? And Hermann Goering, who's the leader, says, it'll take 6 weeks tops. And that begins the Battle of Britain. It's the only all-air war in World War II. So the German Luftwaffe, the Air Force, comes over to bomb England. But every time they come, the RAF, the Royal Air Force, is on them in a second, and they don't understand why. And they don't understand that England had invented something that none of the other countries had yet, and it was called radar, right?
Oh.
So before World War II, if you were a plane, you had to just like walkie-talkie people. Hey, I'm coming. My coordinates are 32, 67, 89 or whatever, and the person would have to kind of talk you in. But now the English had invented radar. You think of like the thing that goes around. You see the blips coming, and so they had set up radar stations all along the south coast. And so when they would see the German Air Force coming, all the blips, they could say where it was going, and how fast it was traveling. So the RAF fighters, knowing where it was coming, what they would do is they would fly high up into the clouds and basically be hiding. And then you'd see all of these German bombers flying, and then they would attack from above and behind. And they would come from where the sun was shining. If you think of my ceiling light as the sun, they would come out of the sun like this and attack from behind, so that they could get a strafing run on the bomber formations and then pull up. And when the German fighters came to fight after them, they would be looking right at the sun, right? Imagine you're trying to shoot somebody and you're just getting blasted with the solar wind. And so the RAF was defeating the German military or the German Air Force time and time again. So the German Air Force comes up with a new plan. They start bombing these radar sites, but the English start building them up again. And now the German Air Force realizes we're not going to be able to defeat the Air Force. So what we're going to do for the first time in history is we're going to bomb civilians. So they would go over London and they would just drop bombs, killing anybody and everybody. Why do you think they started to do that, Malcolm?
Because there was nothing else they could do, so they just started relying on acts of terror.
Yeah, and what's the idea, right? How does killing all those people, how does that help, Malcolm?
If they just keep killing all the people, eventually they're going to give up, because every day somebody's going to die, so they're going to give up and surrender.
Right? They're going to give up because either they're like demoralized, right? Imagine a bomb lands on your house, kills your wife and kids. If you're a fighter pilot, maybe that makes you angry, like I'm going to get them, but maybe you're just like so depressed you can't even fly anymore, right? But the other idea is that it's going to wreck the economy. You need money to buy things and build things. And if you fly over a city and you blow up all the factories,
then you don't have like any more of whatever it creates.
Yeah, and all the people that are supposed to work in those factories, are they going to want to go to work?
No.
No, because if I knew that Trader Joe's was going to get bombed, I'm not going to go. Like, you get your own avocados, Jaden. I'm not going over there. Crazy. But that sets a bad precedent, because when Germany starts to do that, that's what England and America later and all of the other countries will do. And it culminates in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, right? America realized these guys aren't going to give up. There's only one thing that we can do. Show them that we will kill every last person if they don't do what we say, right? But it starts here in the 40s. World War I, not many civilians die because it's German soldiers and Austro-Hungarian soldiers fighting each other in the trenches. World War II becomes total war. You kill the soldiers, you bomb the buildings, you kill the civilians, like you round up the prisoners, you kill the prisoners. And World War II is the most deadly war because of this. Anyways, all right, that is that.